Hi, folks. This is Justina back again with another vlog of my experiences from the point of view of an older transgender person. This week, titled my vlog Growing Up Trans because I want y'all to know a little bit more about me and my history. And so this week I thought I would discuss my experiences um, as a younger trans person. As I mentioned in my last vlog, um, my journey has been long, and that journey began, of course, when I was a young child. Uh, I was a child of neglect and an only child, so my memories don't go back quite as far as many people do. My earliest memories that are vivid anyway are from the time that I was 7 years old. And at that time, during that time, or at age 7, my father, whom I never had any kind of relationship with at all, he, we just didn't talk. And looking back, I think probably in light of the kind of young person that I was, I think he probably was pretty disappointed uh, from the point of view of a father because of my feminine mannerisms, which were already apparent even at that age. And so I think that that may have gotten in the way of him establishing any real relationship with me, although I don't really know for sure. I've never been able to converse with him since then to find out what his feelings were. But my guess is that it was partly it was along those lines. This early part of my trans journey, um, he left, and then the next thing I really remember is uh, entering middle school, and it was in middle school uh, that I remember most vividly my experiences um, as I began to learn and grow. And well, let's back up a little bit. Before middle school, kind of in between age 7 and age 11, which would be about the time I entered middle school, um, I used to play, and my friends were the girls. And I used to play house and all the things that girls do. Um, when I was young enough to where both myself and the girls that were my friends, my neighbors, were not particularly concerned about gender because of our youth. And so that was nice for me because I felt like I had a group that I could relate to and that I could have fun with. And so that was how it was for me until middle school. And then once I went into middle school, I was shipped off to a private school for boys, and where you kind of live in a dormitory kind of situation, which was not a good situation for me because of my feminine ways. And so I ended up being subjected to physical violence, assaulted on more than one occasion, one time severely. And that, that assault affected me greatly and, you know, gave me my first conflict about, how was I supposed to act around these boys that I didn't relate to at all. I didn't have any camaraderie with my peers in school, and so uh, that was painful, and it was the first big pain. I suppose the pain of losing my father, and then by that time, by middle school, I had a stepfather who promptly wanted nothing to do with me also. And I do know that his reason for that was my femininity. He didn't see me as man enough to be his stepson, and so he kind of didn't want anything to do with me either. So I didn't have much of a relationship with him, um, but he was the one that saw me off to school in the winter and camp in the summer. So I only spent about a month a year at home, and that kind of disconnected me from my mother as well. But what was really hurtful was right about that same time as I came into middle school and was sixth, seventh grade, right around there, was that the girls in my life, they were growing and learning, and they were becoming more aware of they were seeing me in a more gendered light, and they were all too aware by this time that I had the wrong genitals and therefore couldn't be a part of their club. I wasn't allowed to be, in their circle. And that probably hurt me a lot more than even the physical violence that I was subjected to by the boys. Uh, and because, they were my only, you know, connection that, people I could relate to. So I really had no one. I had maybe one or two friends that were neighbors at that time um, that I wasn't really that close to. So I was pretty alone, and I just didn't feel like I fit in with anybody. And of course, this was in the '70s. For any of you who might know what the '70s were like in general, as far as sociology and people's perspectives, I was seen mostly as gay, which wasn't the case exactly. And but that's kind of why I was subjected to being an outcast in that period of time. Um, so I had a general lack of acceptance, from pretty much everybody, and I realized around that time that um, the world was not going to let me be me, and that I didn't know what to do about that. I didn't know. I was now at this point. I'm 13 years old. I'm almost 14. I'm looking at going into high school, and I know it. And I know that this is not going to work out well at all. I had spent the last half of eighth grade at age 13 in a public school, and that didn't go good at all. I was um, picked on, bullied, beaten. Uh, it was not good at all, and because I really at that age, not only did I not know how to hide who I was, I also I didn't want to. I was rebelling against these people who were rejecting me and being myself to spite them, and that's just kind of what I did at that time, up until that time, and so it was summer. I was facing the start of high school as I come into my 14th year. I was 13, almost 14, and my stepfather, he one day decided to leave the house, and he left a loaded firearm in a place where it was not hard for me to find it. And I did happen to run across that firearm, and that was my first attempt at suicide because I felt like um, there was no way I could face, a continuation of high school and all that. Um, Knowing what had already occurred when it came to school and my peers and other people and trying to get along, and I just didn't fit in. And so, you know, because I'm talking to you now that I didn't choose to do that at that time. I thought about it hard. I had that weapon in a couple of different places trying to decide what would be most effective. And it, it, it came to me that there must be some other solution. And I decided I would look for another way out. And it wasn't a couple days later that because of insomnia, I saw a commercial at 3 a.m. For a group home in the capital city of the state I lived in at the time. And so a couple of days later, I had packed a bag and I was off and leaving home and headed for the group home. Uh, and that's group homes is where I stayed until I was 18, or nearly 18 anyway. And in the group homes, what I had learned to do for survival with my peers was to to hide the things about me that were feminine or might be perceived as gay, as that was the terminology at the time. I don't believe well, I know back then that I'd never heard the word transgender and certainly had never met anyone who had transitioned. So that was how I was handling that. Now they had counseling at the group home, and with the counselors, I was telling them, what was bothering me, and um, in addition to my family problems that I had, that was the reason I needed to leave home. With the rejection from my stepfather and all the other stuff I had experienced with family as well as with my gender and my peers. So, because I was open about how I was feeling and what I was experiencing with the counseling, and it was pretty competent, thank God, um, they kept me out of high school. And so I went, almost 3 years of my young teen life without having to go to high school because they knew that would be a disaster for a kid like me, um, who, I was um, very, very feminine. And it was just who I was. There was nothing, you know, and I did the best I could to hide that um, from my fellow roomies at the nursing home, at the group home. And you know, I guess I started to do a good enough job of it to where I started to wonder, over a period of years. By the time I was 18, um, I thought maybe I could pull this guy thing off. By then, I thought, well, um, maybe I can change, or at least I can get along in life because I've figured out how to basically suppress and repress and deny to some extent even the person that I was. And so by the time I hit 20, I was, number one, very confused. I was searching for solutions, uh, to how to fit in life, and how to be able to operate without, being in harm's way, and be able to get along with other people. It was not easy to do, because I had taken on a life that really wasn't mine. I was not being honest with anyone, and that went into being not being honest with myself. And so I was hopeless. That's how I felt, was hopeless. I felt, and I know that by then, because of the repression of trying to keep myself, um, out of sight from everyone, including myself. At that point, I was also by then very damaged as a young person, and really out of sorts, not knowing how to manage my life. And so I say all of this. In my first video, I said that I wanted to make these vlogs in order to try to help younger trans people, or trans people of any age really, have a less traumatic experience than what I had. And so what I would say at this point to anyone who is at that stage in life where you're younger, between the ages of 0 and 20, um, and you're trans, even if you don't have the terminology for it, that you know, have these feminine ways about you. Of course, today with all the information available, I think you probably would know that your situation, you may be questioning and trying to figure out, whether your um, malady is that you're transgender. And I understand that for those who are under 18, you have to be very careful. With me and my parents, they just kind of rejected me right out of the box without me having to actually say anything. I didn't have the terminology. I didn't know what was going on with me. And so I couldn't have come out to them because I wouldn't have known what to say to them. I was just being me. And up until age 14, when I began to hide that. Of course, I wasn't around my parents anymore by then. So for me, I didn't have to deal with parental issues when it came to my gender. And luckily, I was able to confide in the counselors at the group homes when it came to that issue, and that was dealt with by them as best they could without any. They didn't really know what to do with me either. But, so it was kind of tricky. But for you folks out there that are younger, who are watching me today, um, you have to be very careful. You really have to judge your situation. Is it safe for you to express your gender identity with your parents? Is it safest for you to just be yourself, but not necessarily express yourself as a youth? Can you do that and not damage yourself like I did, um, and become confused about who you are as a result of denying who you are? You have to figure out, can I do that, or not? And then you have to, your parents pretty well as a young person. And you've got to decide whether you think that they will, you don't want to risk the roof over your head as a young person. I ended up leaving the group homes before I turned 18, and at age 18, uh, I was on my own entirely and had no support and had to figure out how to survive, how to support myself, how to keep a roof over my head and food in my mouth, while at the same time still trying to figure out who I was. And those were really, really difficult years for me. They were several years like that where I was learning how to navigate life as an adult. And you don't want to have to start doing that any younger than, you know, preferably age 18 or even older if possible. So if you feel that your parents are one or the other or both are going to, throw you out of the house, then you're going to have to find some other outlet. You're going to have to maybe a counselor or a school counselor or friends or someone to turn uh, to be able to express, how you feel inside and uh, try not to endanger your house and home. Um, because if you should end up out on the street, that's just um, unimaginably awful. You just can't. If you've never had to do that, you cannot imagine what that's like. I can because I was there, and let me tell you, you don't want to do it. It may seem glamorous in documentaries and whatnot, kids out on the streets you see in LA or New York or whatever. The fact is that their lives are sheer hell, and you don't want to be there. You just don't want to go there at all. That's just more damage piled on top of the damage that may have piled up in your life because you're trying to live your life as a young person who's transgender, and either you may not even know that, or if you do, you're having to keep that under wraps in order for you to keep your own safety. But if you can come out to your parents and be you and before your peers, that's the best thing to do. You avoid all that damage that you can do to yourself as a result of repression and denial that I did, which led to more bad ends. And it's necessary for time that I go through my experience kind of in sections, and that's why I sort of chosen to talk about, my youth through age 20, and then in the next video, I'll probably step through the next 20 years and tell you what my experiences were there. But I just want you to know what my background is, who I am as Justina, and what point of view I'm coming at from in terms of my history, and to let you all young people know that in today's day and age, in at least a large portion of our country here in the U.S. Um, you can. It's not impossible. You can be yourself without risking, house and home, or your family relationships, or whatever it may be. It it's possible, but you've got to really look at your situation closely. Everybody's situation is different. You may be from a rural area. There's a lot of things that you have to consider. You may, if you have the means, you may need to do what I did when I was young, which was to change my situation. I was very fortunate to be able to do that. Not everyone can. But anyhow, I just want to encourage you not to go to that if you can avoid it, to stay away from that denial, that repression that causes self-doubt. It leads to not understanding your own self because you're trying to be someone you're not in order for other people to accept you, and that just leads to trouble for yourself and for other people around you, as you'll see in my next vlog as we discuss some of the things that I engaged in as a young person in order to try to fit in. That didn't work out for me, and it certainly did not work out for others either. It wasn't fair for anybody. Okay, so that's it for this one. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me again. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.